The fluorescent lights hummed their usual monotonous tune as Marcus Chin pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway of Sterling and Associates, one of Manhattan's most prestigious consulting firms. It was 6:47 p.m. and the building was finally emptying out, a sea of tailored suits and clicking heels flooding toward the elevators, eager to escape into their evening plans. None of them looked at him. They never did. To them, he was just part of the furniture, as invisible as the potted plants he watered every Tuesday. Marcus didn't mind. Invisibility had become his armor, his shield against the judgments and assumptions that came with wearing a janitor's uniform while raising a 7-year-old daughter alone. Every night, he mopped these floors thinking about Sophia's smile when he'd walk through their apartment door, her homework spread across their small kitchen table, waiting for him to help her with math problems between bites of the dinner Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B had kindly saved for them. This particular Thursday evening started like any other. Marcus was emptying trash bins on the 14th floor when he heard voices rising from the main conference room. The door stood slightly ajar, and though he knew he should simply do his job and move on, something in the tone, sharp, frustrated, desperate, made him pause. "This is a disaster," a woman's voice cut through the air. "The Yamamoto delegation arrives in 45 minutes. And our translator just called from the hospital with food poisoning." 45 minutes. This deal represents 18 months of work. And we're about to lose it because we can't communicate. Marcus recognized the voice. Jennifer Walsh, senior partner. Always polite when she noticed him, which was rare. Through the gap in the door, he could see at least a dozen people around the massive conference table, their faces painted with panic. A man's voice, thick with frustration. "I've called every translation service in the city. It's 7 p.m. on a Thursday, everyone's either booked or can't get here in time. We need someone who speaks fluent Japanese, and we need them now." "What about Martinez from the legal department?" someone suggested. "Conversational at best. This negotiation involves technical specifications, financial terminology, cultural nuances. We need someone who really speaks the language, not someone who can order sushi." Marcus's hand tightened on his trash bag. He should walk away. He should mind his own business. These people lived in a different world. One where a janitor's voice didn't carry weight. Where someone like him offering help would be seen as presumptuous at best, laughable at worst. But then he thought of Sophia. Of the dream he'd let slip away when his wife died 3 years ago, leaving him alone with a 4-year-old and medical bills that had consumed everything. He thought of the PhD in international relations he'd been 2 semesters away from completing. The life he'd carefully built that had crumbled in the span of 6 months. He thought of all the times he'd told Sophia that kindness costs nothing, that helping others is never wrong, that who you are isn't defined by what you do for a living. He knocked on the door. The conversation stopped abruptly. All eyes turned toward him, confusion etched on every face. Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks but pushed forward anyway. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I couldn't help but overhear. I speak Japanese fluently. If you need help, I'm available." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Then, like a crack spreading across ice, someone snickered. A young man in an expensive suit leaned back in his chair, barely suppressing a smirk. That's very kind," Jennifer said, her tone hovering between politeness and dismissal. "But this is a very complex negotiation. We need someone with experience in corporate translations. Someone who understands the technical specifications of industrial machinery exports, the nuances of Japanese business etiquette, and the cultural significance of indirect communication in high-stakes negotiations." Marcus finished calmly. "I understand. I also speak Mandarin, Spanish, German, French, and Portuguese." "The Japanese delegation you're meeting with, Yamamoto Industries from Osaka, they'll Appreciate if you acknowledge their company's 80-year history before discussing terms. And the senior negotiator likely won't speak first out of respect for hierarchy. His second, usually a woman named Tanaka-san, if my research on their company structure is correct, will lead the technical discussions. The room had gone completely still. The smirk vanished from the young man's face. Jennifer Walsh stood up slowly, studying Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. How do you? Why are you? She struggled for words. Working as a janitor, Marcus supplied, his voice gentle but steady. Because life happens. Because when my wife died, our daughter needed a parent, not a paycheck. Because the university program I was in didn't offer evening classes. And Sophia was 4 years old and couldn't be left alone at night. Because this job has health insurance and flexible hours and lets me be there when she goes to sleep and when she wakes up. Because sometimes we do what we must, not what we planned. An older man at the far end of the table, Richard Sterling himself, the firm's founder, cleared his throat. What did you study, Mr. Chen? Marcus Chen. I was completing my PhD in international relations at Columbia, specializing in East Asian economic policy. Before that, I worked for 3 years at the State Department's Translation Division. He paused, then added, I clean your office on Mondays. You keep a photo of your granddaughter on your desk. She's learning violin. The sheet music is usually visible. Richard Sterling's eyes widened with something that looked like shame. For 18 months, Marcus had cleaned his office weekly. And the man had never truly seen him. Jennifer made a decision. Mr. Chen, we would be honored, grateful, if you would help us this evening. We can't pay you what a professional translator would charge on such short notice. But I'm not asking for payment, Marcus interrupted softly. I'm offering help. There's a difference. 27 minutes later, the Yamamoto delegation arrived. Marcus had changed from his janitor's uniform into a spare dress shirt someone had retrieved from the office gym. Though he kept his worn jeans, there was no time for more. When the elevator doors opened and 5 Japanese businesspeople stepped out, Marcus bowed at precisely the right angle, spoke the traditional greeting with the proper honorifics, and smoothly transitioned into introducing the Sterling and Associates team with appropriate titles and respect. For the next 3 hours, Marcus didn't just translate words, he translated intentions, meanings, cultural contexts. When the negotiations hit a snag over payment terms, he recognized the subtle signs of discomfort in the lead negotiators' posture and suggested a break for tea, allowing both sides to save face and reconsider their positions. He caught idioms that would have confused a literal translation and conveyed them in ways that made both parties smile with understanding. By 10:30 p.m., papers were signed. An $18 million deal was complete. The Yamamoto delegation bowed deeply to Marcus, thanking him not just for his translation but for his understanding. The senior negotiator told him, in Japanese, that his skill and respect had honored both companies. After they left, Marcus prepared to return to his cart to finish his shift before heading home to relieve Mrs. Rodriguez. But Richard Sterling stopped him. Mr. Chen, sit down. Please. The entire team was still there, and they were all looking at him differently now. Not with the pity he'd feared, but with something else. Respect. Recognition. Remorse. I've been walking past you for how long? Jennifer Walsh said, her voice thick with emotion. How many brilliant people do we not see every day because we've decided they're not important based on their uniform or their job title? Richard Sterling pulled out a chair. Marcus, I can't give you back the years we failed to see you. But I can offer you a position with this firm. Director of International Relations. Full benefits, salary commensurate with your experience. Flexible hours because your daughter comes first. Always. Marcus felt his eyes burn. Mr. Sterling, I appreciate. And, the older man continued. We'll cover the remaining coursework for your PhD. You were 2 semesters away. Consider it an investment in our new director. The young man who had smirked earlier stood up, walked around the table, and extended his hand to Marcus. I'm sorry, he said simply. I judged you. It was wrong, and I'm sorry. Marcus shook his hand, seeing in the young man's eyes a lesson learned. A perspective shifted. That night, when Marcus finally made it home at midnight, Sophia was asleep on the couch, a book about languages open across her chest. He gently lifted her, carried her to bed, and whispered in 6 different languages that he loved her. That dreams don't die, they just sometimes take detours. That kindness always matters, even when the world tells you it doesn't. 3 months later, Marcus Chin stood in front of a Columbia University classroom as a guest lecturer. His PhD now complete. He told his students about invisible people, about the dignity in every form of honest work, about the moment he chose to knock on that conference room door despite knowing he might be laughed at. Humanity, he told them, isn't found in titles or salaries or corner offices. It's found in the moment you choose to see people, really see them. And in the moment you choose to offer help even when the world has given you every reason to protect yourself first. In the back of the lecture hall, Sophia sat with Mrs. Rodriguez, bursting with pride. And in the front row, Jennifer Walsh and Richard Sterling sat alongside a dozen employees from Sterling and Associates, there to hear the men they'd once overlooked teach them the most important lesson any business could learn. That everyone you meet knows something you don't. That assumptions close doors, while curiosity opens them. That the most valuable people in your life might be the ones you've trained yourself not to see. And that sometimes, the person who saves you is the one you never thought to ask. Marcus still remembered what it felt like to be invisible. He just made sure he never made anyone else feel that way again.